changes in countdown. Falcon 9 is in startup. Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
You're looking at a live view of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and cargo Dragon at Launch Complex 39A, set to lift off this afternoon to the International Space Station. Good afternoon and welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. I'm Megan Cruz with NASA Communications. Today's cargo mission, known as Commercial Resupply Services Mission 22, is scheduled to launch at 1:29 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be the second resupply mission to the space station on the upgraded Cargo Dragon spacecraft. We will show you some of the incredible technology headed to space today, including brand new solar arrays to give the station a power boost. But first, we are really excited to be simulcasting today's live coverage on NASA TV and the SpaceX webcast with our partners based at the company's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Let's bring in Shiva Bharadwaj now. Shiva, it's so nice to have you with us today.
Thanks, Megan. It's really exciting to be covering today's mission in partnership with NASA. It's the 5th Dragon flight to the International Space Station since May 2020, with many more planned for the upcoming year. And as you mentioned, this will be the second cargo resupply mission for our upgraded Dragon. This cargo vehicle will be joining the Crew 2 vehicle on orbit, making it just the 3rd time that we've had 2 Dragons docked at the space station. Now you're looking at a live view of a brand new Falcon 9 booster. This is actually the first new booster that we're using this year, and the vehicle stands 229 feet tall, or slightly taller than a 21-story building. Now, Falcon 9 is a reusable 2-stage rocket designed and manufactured by SpaceX for the reliable and safe transport of both people and payloads into Earth orbit and beyond. This Falcon 9 rolled out to the pad and went vertical on Tuesday, June 1st around 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And actually, just before the program started at around T-minus 35 minutes, we began loading propellants onto Falcon 9. Falcon 9 uses 2 propellants. The first of those is a fuel, a refined form of kerosene known as RP1 or Rocket Propellant 1. And for our oxidizer, we use super chilled liquid oxygen referred to as LOX. We chill the LOX well below the boiling point, which helps increase its density so we can load more of it into the first and second stages. Now, to start the engines, we also need an ignition source. For that, Falcon 9 uses a chemical igniter called TTAB. You'll see a characteristic green spark at around the T-minus 0 mark right before the rocket takes off. Now, the bottom 2/3 of the vehicle is what we refer to as the first stage. Its objective is to accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere to space, and then it'll separate from the rest of the rocket. Today, we will be attempting to recover this first stage on our drone ship named Of Course I Still Love You. That's stationed out in the Atlantic Ocean. And if you've been keeping count at home, if we successfully land the Falcon 9 today, it'll mark our 86th successful landing of an orbital class rocket. Now, on top of the first stage, we have Falcon 9's second stage. It has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine that ignites after the first stage separates. The second stage is ultimately what will carry Dragon into its intended orbit, allowing Dragon to then separate and then eventually for it to continue with its rendezvous to the International Space Station. Now, finally, at the very top of the rocket is the Dragon spacecraft. Dragon was designed from the beginning to be reused. This new version of Dragon was designed for up to 5 flights, while the previous version could only support 3. Just like today's Falcon 9, we're flying a brand new Dragon spacecraft, which we'll hope to fly again in the future. And a bit later on in the broadcast, I'll share some details on the advancements we're making with reusing certain aspects of the vehicle. Now, today is a cargo mission, and we are delivering nearly 7,000 pounds of cargo to the International Space Station. That includes critical material to support dozens of science and research investigations that'll happen on board the orbiting laboratory. To this day, Dragon remains the only spacecraft currently flying that's capable of transporting significant amounts of cargo to and from planet Earth. We'll get a little more into detail on what some of that research is later on in today's webcast. But first, why don't we check in at the launch site, Kennedy Space Center, with Marie. Marie, how are things over there?
Hey, Shiva, nice to see you. Things are looking actually much better than they were just an hour ago at the launch site. If we could take a live look again at Launch Complex 39A, you can see some cumulus clouds in the area. Weather still standing at about 60% favorable for launch, and it's been trending in a better direction. In fact, just an hour ago, we had no-go conditions for weather. We were in violation of the cumulus cloud rule, but the threat seems to be diminishing at this hour. The weather team are watching a couple of cells south of Patrick Space Force Base. That's a little bit south of the Cape here, and they are headed north, but it's looking like it's not going to be a showstopper. So again, trending in the right direction. The threat of lightning remains low, so we are 60% go for weather, and that's been most of the chatter that we've heard so far in these last couple of hours. Technically speaking, we have heard SpaceX working no major issues. And again, we're looking live at the launch pad there. You can see some of that liquid oxygen venting off of the first stage Falcon 9 booster. One other really cool thing about this first stage booster, if SpaceX successfully recovers it and refurbishes it, this is the same booster slated to launch the next 4 astronauts to the International Space Station in October. Those will be NASA astronauts Raja Chari, Thomas Marshburn, Kayla Barron, and European Space Agency astronaut Matthias Maurer. So NASA's Commercial Crew Program folks watching this mission closely with particular interest in that first stage booster. So we have fueling again well underway. That began on the first stage at T-minus 35 minutes. We're standing by for fueling on the second stage at T-minus 16 minutes. And then as we move a little bit closer to launch, the Falcon 9 pre-launch engine chill will begin at T-minus 7 minutes. Followed by the transition to internal power at T-minus 5 minutes. And that period, those last 5 minutes before launch, are what we call terminal count. And then as we close in on that final minute before launch, the propellant tanks will be pressurized for flight. The SpaceX launch director, Frank Messina, will verify whether the team is go for launch. And finally, we'll be standing by for liftoff at 1:29 and 15 seconds p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And Falcon 9 has just that single second to launch today in order to rendezvous and dock to the space station as scheduled. That is tracking for approximately 5 a.m. Eastern Time, Saturday morning, June 5th. So we'll continue to keep an eye on the weather and give you an update as we get a little bit closer to liftoff. For now, Megan, back to you.
Marie, thank you. All right, as promised, it's now time to check out some of the fascinating payloads packed inside Dragon today. We'll first look at some of the science experiments sponsored by the ISS National Lab.
More than 900 pounds of research and supplies are launching to the International Space Station on SpaceX's 22nd Commercial Resupply Services mission, including several investigations sponsored by the U.S. National Laboratory. This mission has everything, from fundamental and applied research to payloads dedicated to in-space production applications, recognizable private sector partners supporting research and development, and student-led experiments. Let's take a deeper look into some of the investigations that are launching on SpaceX CRS-22. Colgate-Palmolive, the global household and consumer products company, will launch the first private sector oral healthcare investigation to the ISS on this mission. The project aims to identify the molecular characteristics of a healthy and diseased oral microbiome. The research team will study unique plaque pathologies in relation to oral health status, examining microgravity's effects on biofilm formation and comparing responses to common oral care agents. Results could help Colgate-Palmolive develop more effective products for consumers on Earth. Each year, 25 million metric tons of cotton are grown around the world, and each kilogram requires thousands of liters of water to produce. In an effort to minimize water consumption used for cotton production, Target Corporation has funded a project from the University of Wisconsin to examine the response of cotton plants to the stress of microgravity and evaluate effects on growth and root behavior. This investigation seeks to better understand the genetics involved in root system development, which could lead to the production of cotton plants that use water more efficiently on Earth. The National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, one of the 27 institutes and centers of the National Institutes of Health, continues to work with the ISS National Lab to fund projects as part of the Tissue Chips in Space initiative. Tissue chips contain human cells grown on an artificial scaffold to model the structure and function of human tissue. Using tissue chips in space, researchers can develop better models of disease and more accurately test potential new therapeutics for patients on Earth. This mission includes a tissue chips in space investigation from the University of Washington. The research team will use tissue chip systems that model the human kidney to better understand kidney stone formation, the body's use of vitamin D, and a condition in which a person's urine contains unusually high amounts of protein. Pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly and Company has a history of sending research and development to the orbiting laboratory. On this mission, the company will launch an investigation to examine the effects of gravity on the physical state and properties of freeze-dried pharmaceutical products. Results could help Lilly improve the chemical and physical stability of pharmaceutical products for patients on Earth. The investigations launching on this mission aim to bring value to our nation and drive a robust, sustainable market in low Earth orbit. To learn more about all the payloads on this mission that are sponsored by the ISS National Lab, and to learn about current opportunities to become part of the space station research community, please visit issnationallab.org.
Now, you heard in that video about an experiment with cotton. Let's take a closer look at that one, because you might be amused by its name, TikTok. And no, it has nothing to do with the social media app TikTok. Here to help us understand the name and why this research is so significant is Principal Investigator Dr. Simon Gilroy. Dr. Gilroy, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure to be here.
Well, obviously, we've said TikTok. Your TikTok is different from the TikTok most of us know. So what is your TikTok?
Yep, we definitely came second. So it's an acronym for Targeting Improved Cotton Through Orbital Cultivation.
And what does that mean? What are you trying to do here?
So we've got the opportunity to understand a little bit more about how cotton grows by growing it on the space station and doing the kind of experiments you just simply can't do when you're on the Earth.
Mm-hmm. And how are you actually going to grow cotton on the space station, and how much of it are you trying to grow?
All right, so cotton gets to be a really big plant, so we're not going to grow full-sized cotton plants, 6 foot tall. This is actually the chamber that we are going to send up. So there are 12 of these, which are going to go up onto the space station. Each one of them has 4 cotton seeds in there. And we've set it up so they'll actually germinate while they're on the station. And they'll fill this chamber after about 6 days.
Wow, that's amazing. And so what exactly are you trying to figure out in space that can hopefully help us here on Earth?
Cotton is an incredibly thirsty crop. It uses tremendous amount of water, hundreds of gallons just to make one t-shirt. And it also uses a lot of inputs like nutrients that the farmers have to add, pesticides. And a lot of those features of cotton, they are root traits. So they're things that, the root takes up the water, the root takes up the nutrients. And so what we're hoping to do on the space station is learn a little bit more about how that root system develops, with the idea that if we can, very specifically for us, understand how gravity directs that root system to grow and spread throughout the soil, we might be able to target features there that then we can give that information to breeders, who will then be able to go down the road of improving cotton.
Yeah, basically to make better cotton, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing. How does it feel to have science going up to space today?
It is an amazing opportunity. We've shot a couple of experiments up to the space station before. Every single time, it's a rush to see your stuff going up on the rocket.
I got to ask you, why cotton?
Cotton, partly because we have the opportunity to understand a little bit more about a really important economic crop with a big environmental footprint on Earth. So using the facilities of the space station to do things that we just could never do on Earth. And also, there have been a lot of plant biology experiments done by a lot of great researchers on the station, but on a relatively few species of plants. And so cotton is going to give us this fantastic tool to ask, how different is it from these other plants and how similar? What do all plants do when they're in space, and what does very specifically particular to each kind of plant?
Doctor, I'm so excited to see what you find out. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And one more notable payload I wanted to tell you about is the first satellite developed by the island nation of Mauritius. That's east of Madagascar, if you didn't know that. It's CubeSat, which is a small satellite about this big, will photograph the region and conduct experimental communication with other islands. So really cool there. Again, just really fascinating payloads on today's mission. Now let's head back to Shiva for an update.
Thanks, Megan. We're just under T-minus 15 minutes and counting to the liftoff of a Falcon 9 carrying Cargo Dragon on the next commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station. Now, as we talked about earlier, Dragon was designed with reusability in mind. To date, 9 of our cargo resupply missions have launched on flight-proven Dragon spacecraft. And while we have a history of reflying cargo vehicles and now crew vehicles with the successful launch of Crew 2, as of today, we will also reuse Dragon's heat shield structure for the first time. The heat shield flying today safely returned astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley to Earth on the Demo 2 mission last year. Reusability allows SpaceX to refly the most expensive parts of the spacecraft, and that in turn drives down the cost of space access. So while Dragon today is a new vehicle, there are a handful of components flying that have seen some space before, the heat shield structure just being one example. Now, speaking of new technologies, the astronauts on board the International Space Station are eagerly awaiting this next delivery of science to keep them busy on the world's only orbiting laboratory. We had a chance to catch up with a couple of them to hear about the work they've been doing since they arrived safely on the Crew 2 mission back in April.
Hi everyone, welcome to the International Space Station. I'm Aki Hoshide and we're here during Expedition 65 and
I'm Megan MacArthur, one of the flight engineers for the mission. And you probably know we have a cargo mission coming up real soon, SpaceX 22. And I'm excited to see what that's going to be like. I think it's going to affect our pace and everything that we've got going on. Aki, you've seen this before. You captured actually the first cargo resupply mission from Dragon about 9 years ago. So tell me, what was that like?
Yeah, 9 years ago. That's a long time ago. Well, that was my first time to actually capture a cargo vehicle with a robotic arm, and so it was a horrifying 2 minutes, holding my breath and trying to capture it without making any mistakes.
This cargo Dragon will be actually a little bit different. So what's different about this one?
This time it's just going to dock. So without the help of the robotic arm, it's going to automatically dock to the International Space Station.
And of course, it will be similar to our crewed vehicle that we came up in, so everything should look pretty much the same. Just there won't be people, there'll be cargo and a lot of science experiments. Some of the science samples will arrive in powered payload lockers, so they can be frozen temperatures. But some of the samples will arrive in this cooler type of bag, which is called a double cold bag. It's a super insulated bag, and we put ice bricks in there along with the samples to keep them at the right temperature. So I'll show you what that looks like. Oh, looks like we have a stowaway. These are the ice bricks, and they can maintain a temperature between -32 and +37 Celsius. They're just room temperature right now, or I wouldn't be holding them with bare hands. But you can see we would fill that up with the ice bricks as well as the samples. We also send samples home this way, and they have a certain amount of time that they will stay at temperature before they're recovered by the team on the ground. You know, I'm excited about the tardigrades. I told you about the water bears, super excited about that. They're little microscopic creatures that can survive in extreme environments. And the cell science 4 experiment is looking at what can we see by looking at their genes? How do they survive and adapt to extreme environments? And then the hope is that that information can be used to look at stress factors in humans when we're living in space. Another one I think is really exciting that has benefits both for us in space but also on Earth is a new ultrasound experiment, the butterfly ultrasound, and it's looking at portable ultrasound technology with mobile tech. Some really exciting stuff that kind of covers a big spectrum.
Yeah.
And that was NASA astronaut Megan MacArthur and JAXA astronaut Aki Hoshide aboard the International Space Station. And welcome into the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. The team of flight controllers in Mission Control Houston today is being led by Flight Director Rebecca Wingfield. The teams here in Mission Control will really jump into action tomorrow night into Saturday morning as Cargo Dragon approaches the International Space Station and enters the approach ellipsoid, which we like to think of as an imaginary sphere around the space station that helps us monitor the approach and departure of visiting vehicles. There are currently 7 crew members living and working aboard the International Space Station. Expedition 65 consists of NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, and Mark Vandehei, Roscosmos cosmonauts Pyotr Dubrov and Oleg Novitsky, Aki Hoshide of JAXA, and Thomas Pesquet of the European Space Agency. One major component flying in Dragon's trunk today is the first pair of Boeing-made iROSA solar arrays, which will be installed to the 2B and 4B channels of the P6 truss by Thomas Pasquet and Shane Kimbrough over 2 spacewalks planned for June 16th and June 20th. This will be the first of 3 deliveries of these iROSA solar arrays. There will be 6 in all to upgrade and augment the power for the 6 of 8 power channels on the station. As Crew Dragon approaches the International Space Station in the morning hours on June 5th, NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur will be monitoring the arrival from the station's cupola. And once Dragon arrives to the station, it will dock to the Zenith port on the space-facing side of the station's Harmony module and will join 4 other spacecrafts: Crew Dragon, Cygnus 15, the Soyuz MS-18, and Progress 77. Cargo Dragon will remain attached to the International Space Station for about 1 month before being packed up with critical science and supplies and will splash down in the Atlantic Ocean for that science to be analyzed back here on Earth. Again, everything is still a go from here in Mission Control Houston, and we're looking forward to welcoming another vehicle to the International Space Station. So for now, we'll head back out to Kennedy. Megan.
It is now T-minus 8 minutes and counting until liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket and Cargo Dragon on the next resupply mission to the International Space Station. Now, you heard Courtney just mention the new solar arrays again. So let's take some time to go more in depth about those because they're really important to the station and what happens there. Take a look at your screen now. This is the first pair of the new Boeing-made ISS rollout solar arrays known as iROSA. They are compact panels you see there that roll open like a huge yoga mat, 63 by 20 feet each. Here they are inside the space station processing facility at the Kennedy Space Center before being packed inside Dragon. The space station currently has 8 pairs of solar arrays. The oldest pair has been in use for more than 20 years. The 2 new solar arrays, plus 4 more to be delivered later, will produce a total of more than 120 kilowatts of electricity. That is enough to power more than 40 U.S. homes. Once combined with the 8 original arrays, the new ones will boost power to the station up to 30%, maximizing use for the orbiting lab for many years to come. And these 2 new solar arrays, like Courtney said, are going to be installed this summer. Now let's head back over to Shiva for an update. Shiva?
Thanks, Megan. We're just over T-minus 7 minutes to go. The SpaceX team currently working no significant issues with the vehicles. At this point, Rocket Propellant 1 fuel is nearly fully loaded on the first stage, completely loaded on the second stage. Liquid oxygen loading is underway on both of the stages as well, and that'll complete at about T-minus 2 minutes to launch. We're also loading helium gas into both of the stages. Falcon 9 uses helium as a pressurant. That's to backfill the propellant tanks as we consume liquid oxygen in RP1 by the Merlin engines during ascent. A helium loading began before the webcast went live, and we'll continue to top it off until about 1.5 minutes before launch. Now, to make sure that the engine startup goes well, we also perform what's called engine chill. It started at about T-minus 7 minutes. We flow a small amount of that super chilled liquid oxygen into the Merlin engine turbopumps, and we do that to avoid thermal shock to the mechanical components once we get that full flow of super chilled liquid oxygen on engine start. Dragon also began its startup sequence at T-minus 35 minutes when it coordinated timing with the Falcon 9. It's currently undergoing a set of vehicle health checks, with its next major milestone happening just before liftoff when it'll transition to internal battery power. Now, the range is standing by, ready to support today's mission. Launch weather is continuing to trend favorably. We had a 60% chance of go, and we're still continuing to monitor some of those clouds and precipitation in the area. So with that, the launch team, Falcon 9, Dragon, the range, all looking good. Weather also trending good. And at about T-minus 5 minutes to go, I'm now joined by Marie to help me walk through these final moments of the terminal count. Marie?
Yeah, Shiva, as you said, weather trending in the better direction. It was a little bit hairy for a couple minutes there. Within the last, I want to say maybe 13 minutes or so, it was right around T-minus 19 or 18 minutes. We heard about some lightning strikes in the area, not coming within that 10-mile radius of the pad, but that was a watch item. It looks like they're not expecting lightning to be an issue, to come that close. And that cell that I mentioned to the south of the pad looks like
Dragon has
there's going to be a little bit
transitioned to
more
configure for
separation
terminal count.
between that. little bit more separation.
Dragon has transitioned to terminal count and is on internal power.
Okay, so we heard that call that Dragon is now on internal power. Again, as Shiva mentioned, the team has already conducted its pre-launch engine chill. Again, this is when SpaceX injects a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen to prepare those Merlin engines inside the first stage to allow for full propellant flow during flight. And we can hear the hissing from some of that liquid oxygen venting off the side of the rocket as it meets that
Strong back retract in progress.
We just heard the call out there as well for strong back retract. The strong back is the truss structure next to Falcon 9 that provides propellants and power to the vehicle. So you can see the clamp arms are opening around the second stage, and the strong back will retract a couple of degrees away from the vertical position, helping to clear the way for Falcon 9's ascent. In these last few minutes, Falcon 9 is performing a set of health checks on its primary communications, avionics, and propulsion systems in preparation for flight. We'll continue to hear call-outs if the engines are sufficiently chilled in and for some of these milestones that are coming up next. And there you can see the strong back starting its retraction away from the vertical position.
And so we saw that strong back or transport erector retract ever so slightly from the Falcon 9 rocket. It will retract fully.
Bleed verification.
Just as we get to the moment of liftoff to allow for Falcon 9 to clear the pad. Also happening now are some checks of the second stage thrust vector control actuators. That is often referred to as an engine wiggle test, and this is when SpaceX moves the thrust
Stage
nozzles.
1 complete.
And we just heard the call for the stage 1 LOX load complete. Again, that engine wiggle test happening now to make sure that the guidance hardware is go for flight. SpaceX will do the exact same checkouts on the first stage engines, and that will happen just a few seconds before ignition.
Yeah, and we just heard that call out for first stage LOX load complete. Next major activity here will be second stage LOX load complete. Usually happens around the T-2 minute mark, and that wraps up propellant loading for Falcon 9 until liftoff. Dragon also continuing to perform final health checks
Stage
to make
2
sure
LOX
all
load
of
complete.
its systems are ready to go for
Dragon is in
ascent
auto
and
idle.
rendezvous with the International Space Station. Weather continuing to trend favorably as Dragon transitions into its ascent state.
And weather remaining go as we are approaching the T-1 minute mark when Dragon will transition to internal power. And weather remaining go as we are approaching the T-1 minute mark when Dragon will transition to internal power.
Falcon 9's in startup. Dragon is in countdown.
Next
go for
activity,
launch.
The launch director. Launch director pulled
Stage
go
2
for
press
launch.
flight.
So with that, all systems are currently go for just over T-minus 30 seconds to liftoff.
T-minus 30 seconds.
And at T0, the rocket will be released from the hold down clamps at the pad. And as I mentioned earlier, that strong back right next to the rocket will retract the rest of the way, clearing the way for liftoff.
Stage 1 press for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Falcon 9 is configured for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
And liftoff of the 22nd SpaceX cargo resupply mission, bringing new solar arrays to the International Space Station.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
We're at T plus 40 seconds into flight. Awesome shot looking
Power and telemetry nominal.
The Cape, where Falcon 9 has launched. We're coming up on the next major milestone. That's the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure. That's when the stresses on the vehicle will be the highest.
Execute.
So in preparation for maximum aerodynamic pressure, we throttled down those Merlin 1D engines. Now that we're through that point, we'll throttle back up and continue on to the next of our sequence of events. We have several happening in rapid succession. That'll be main engine cutoff, followed by a stage separation. Then we'll have a first stage flip maneuver, second engine start, number 1, and then a boost back burn on the first stage. Now, main engine cutoff, or MECO, that's where all 9 of the Merlin 1D engines on the first stage will shut down. That's followed shortly after by stage separation, when both the first and second stages will separate. From there, the first stage will flip to prepare itself for entry. A few seconds later, the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite to boost the Dragon into a low Earth orbit. That's called SES-1. And then finally, on the first stage, we'll have boost back burn start to slow down the first stage in preparation for re-entry. So again, those 5 events: MECO, stage separation, first stage flip maneuver, second engine start, and then the boost back burn, all coming up just in under 10 seconds from now.
MECO. Stage separation confirmed. MVAC ignition.
Stage 1 boost back startup.
So successful Merlin vacuum engine startup. First stage has begun its boost back burn. That burn expected to last about 30 or so seconds. Here's a shot of the second stage Merlin vacuum nozzle. You can see it starting to heat up as we begin this burn. The second stage will continue to burn here for several minutes until about the T plus 8 minute mark.
Stage 1 boost back shutdown.
If you're just joining us, welcome. You're watching a live webcast for the 22nd commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station for NASA. This is SpaceX's 17th launch of the year, and we are flying a cargo configuration of our New Dragon spacecraft. On the right-hand side of your screen is the second stage, which is carrying the Dragon spacecraft into orbit. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see Falcon 9's first stage with the grid fins extending. It just completed its boost back burn and is making its way back to our drone ship. Now, the rocket has to do more than just go up. It has to go sideways really fast. At liftoff, gravity is pulling straight down on the rocket, but as we ascend, we tilt the engines. That's called gimbaling, and that begins to turn the rocket horizontally. We're still going up, but we're also heading horizontally away from the launch pad. That maneuver is called a gravity turn. The rocket typically needs to go about 7.5 kilometers per second, or about 17,500 miles an hour, to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and to get into orbit. So that's what the second stage is doing right now. Now, the first stage, in order to make its way back to our drone ship, named, of course, I Still Love You, it has 2 more burns to do. First is an entry burn. It'll ignite 3 of its Merlin 1 engines. That'll help to slow it down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. And then the next activity will happen much closer to the drone ship. That is the landing burn. Will ignite just the single center Merlin engine to bring the vehicle's speed rapidly down to 0. You can see the grid fins that are extended on the left-hand side of your screen. We use those for atmospheric control. They help steer the Falcon 9 to make sure we make our way back to that drone ship as we get into the thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere. And you'll occasionally see periodic bursts of a white gas like that. That's our attitude control system, giving us little corrections to our attitude. The next major event coming up here for the first stage is entry burn. 3 of the Merlin 1D engines will ignite. Second stage burn continuing to look nominal. Second stage has a little ways to go. It won't be done with this burn until about the T+8 minute mark.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Trajectory nominal. Stage 1 entry burn startup.
So with that, 3 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage igniting to reduce the vehicle's velocity. You can see that on the bottom left corner of your screen. This burn expected to last about 20 seconds. So from here, the grid fins will continue to take the first stage towards our drone ship stationed out in the Atlantic Ocean. At this point, T+6.5 minutes into flight, second stage is making its way to the initial orbit to drop off the Cargo Dragon spacecraft. And if you're just joining us, welcome. On your screen is a live view of Falcon 9's first stage on the left, the second stage on the right. We had an on-time liftoff at 1:29 p.m. Eastern Time. Nominal ascent so far. Talking a little bit more about
Stage 1 transonic.
Talking a little bit more about the first stage. So the next major event coming up is that landing burn. Landing burn is what will bring the vehicle speed rapidly down to 0. Amazing shots of the first stage during re-entry. Once we get closer to the drone ship, we will deploy our 4 symmetric landing legs around the base of the first stage for hopefully a nice soft touchdown on that drone ship. You can see a shot of that on the right-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Picture perfect landing of that Falcon 9 for the first stage. First landing for this first stage. 86 successful recovery overall for SpaceX. Fantastic. Now coming up shortly, second stage is not done. It will be coming up on second engine cutoff. About under 30 seconds from now. It's been burning that whole time since stage separation to bring the 7,000 pounds of cargo into the initial orbit around our planet. And you can see we're getting close to orbital velocity.
Expected loss of signal.
Seco.
Shutdown of the second stage engine. From here, we'll be looking at telemetry, make sure we are in the intended orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Fantastic. So with that, the second stage has just one major task left. It is commanding separation of the Dragon spacecraft just a few minutes from now. Until separation, the second stage will be making some small adjustments during this coast prior to Dragon separation. And we're hoping to have video, there's some video, into the unpressurized cargo section of Dragon. This video from the top of the second stage. We got a good look there at the new rollout solar arrays that Cargo Dragon is bringing to the International Space Station. So separation of the Dragon spacecraft expected at about T plus 12 minutes. We have a little bit of a coast here for ground operators in mission control behind me to ensure that the vehicle is in the right configuration, that there's no conditions that we may want to watch out for after separation. But Dragon and the Stage 2 right now in orbit. Dragon spacecraft will begin to perform some of its own checkouts. Dragon is equipped with 12 service section Draco thrusters that are used primarily for attitude control and proximity next to the space station. It's also got 4 Draco thrusters on the top of the vehicle underneath its nose cone that we use for our thrust maneuvers to help us rendezvous with the International Space Station. So again, successful ascent, successful recovery of our first stage just a few minutes ago. You're looking at a live shot into the Cargo Dragon unpressurized section from the second stage that is in orbit around our planet. Our next major activity coming up shortly, that is Dragon separation from Falcon 9's second stage. Something a little bit different about this Dragon spacecraft. If you followed our first version of Dragon, you'd know that it had deployable solar arrays. This version of Dragon has conformal solar arrays on the body of the spacecraft. So those are mounted along the exterior panel of the trunk that we're looking into right now. Those provide power for the spacecraft as it makes its way to the space station.
Dragon separation confirmed.
Lovely. Planet Earth on the left-hand side. Dragon floating away. You can see the rollout solar arrays from this view atop Falcon 9's second stage, watching Dragon gently float away. So again, activities coming up for Dragon. It will begin its service section Draco checkouts, followed shortly after that by the nose cone
Expected loss of signal
opening. And that's going to complete my coverage here from Hawthorne. But why don't we check in with Courtney at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Courtney?
Thanks, Shiva. Again, just standing by for that nose clone deploy. The nose cone deploy uncovers the 4 forward bulkhead thrusters, which Dragon will use for its major burn maneuvers coming up.